Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. And I understand that there is a collection of people completely new to SE, those that have a little experience, and also some of you that are sexologists and sex therapists. And I'm so glad to have my family here of those. And more, there are sex therapists coming into the trauma world, which I'm so happy about. So tonight, it's mostly going to be about SE, but I'm going to use sexual trauma as the orientation and the way in to working with trauma. And then the May program will go much more deeply into specific practices and exercises. And it's a broad program in May, which is designed for clients who are reluctant to feel their bodies and who struggle with sexuality, and especially those who need to heal from sexual trauma. So you won't get a lot tonight concerning exercises and practices, but it will warm you up to see if you're interested in the May program. But all of us are here because we work with clients who come in struggling with histories of sexual abuse. And if not specifically sexual abuse, enormous body shame around sexuality in general, and challenges with intimate relationships. It's certainly what comes to see me the most. And I feel that somatic experiencing, which I'm going to shorten to SE, is really what offers the most fantastic techniques and the safest and gentlest techniques to support these clients. And that's what we're going to be talking about this webinar. Both when I was trained as a sex therapist and as a regular clinical psychologist, this perspective that SE presents was not part of that. So I'm assuming that some of what I talk about tonight will be familiar, but you may not have been taught real specific ideas about how to work with this. What SE really is it's an orientation. It's a perspective that the majority of practitioners, at least from my experience as teaching practitioners, will find incredibly useful. And SE is designed to be added to what you already do. And it provides some really useful techniques to help all kinds of clients, and especially sexual abuse clients and sexuality, people that struggle with sexuality, new and deeper ways of working with those topics. And whether you're a psychologist or a social worker, an addictions counselor, a school teacher, a sex therapist, anybody that works in the medical field as a doctor or nurse, or a physiotherapist or touch practitioners, even firefighters and first responders, you would all do your work in an SE way. It's really designed to be added to what you do. And what SE provides also that I love so much is that it provides life skills. So even regardless of what the trauma is, it helps us and our clients survive and really at its core, learn to appropriately respond to the stressors of daily life, as well as whatever our histories might hold. So what I'm referring to is what many of you have heard that Dan Siegel calls the window of tolerance, which I like to call the range of resilience. And it's the range that we all optimally function. And what's important about this is that in this ideal range, we have clear thinking. We're able to move out of danger. This is particularly important for sexual abuse survivors. And at the same token, we know to move towards safe people, as well as our goals and our desires. With SE, we learned to set boundaries. We learned to speak what is most important without freezing or collapsing. Again, so important when you're working with couples who want to share what they like and dislike. And having some basic body awareness, which SE provides, helps people learn to recognize when they need to stop and pay attention to the self, how they can, what we call regulate themselves. And many of the SE tools are designed to help people learn how to return to this functional range. And this is, again, really important when you're working with sexuality, because so many people don't have a voice. So many people go into freeze. And when they have sexual trauma in their history, they're being triggered and activated by their partners all the time. So if they can learn to recognize these signs of their bodily reactions and then learn to regulate them, then they can actually have clearer conversations with their partners that aren't based on a reaction. They're not overreactive emotionally. They don't make impulsive decisions like pushing their partner away when in fact their partner is safe. And what we're seeing so much on social media right now is that when people are out of their functional range, they say some really stupid and hateful things. So learning to regulate on a daily basis will help people not be so impulsive in their actions and help them, like I say, learn to manage their daily stressors, which could very well have to do with learning how to appropriately be in the presence of their partner if he or she is actually a safe person. For many people, being out of the range of resilience can show up as overeating, over-medicating, impulsive actions, or depression, despair, and hopelessness, which is, we often see these extremes, don't we? They're either overly reacting or they're just so horribly shut down. Sometimes being out of the range of resilience shows up as physical symptoms or illness that can show up as autoimmune disorders or being highly allergic to foods or environmental sensitivities. So the focus on regulation helps modify a lot of these reactions, whether they're emotional or physical. And that is a lot of what the SE training is focused on. As a sex therapist, I'm wanting people to regulate themselves, like I said, in the presence of their partners, so that they can learn to let in and experience pleasure and be able to receive appropriate, safe touch. So being able to respond as a sexual survivor, one of the issues that so many survivors have is they don't recognize the signs of warning. And we see these clients frequently getting themselves into violent danger. So having this ability to recognize these warning signals will also prevent people from finding themselves in danger again. And just as importantly, we also want our clients to be able to identify the signs of safety, safe people, so that they can find healthy relationships instead of being attracted to the dangerous relationships that they knew in their history. So in short, SE can be used to heal past traumas. It can help one manage emotions and strong reactions in the moment. And it is a brilliant method to help people prepare for future challenging events, which could be public speaking, a test, having difficult conversations with their partners, asking the boss for a raise. All of these preparations can also be done through connection with the body. So in addition to its effective tools, the way I use it as survivors of sexual violence, it's also amazing for working with physical violence, recovering from medical procedures, from accidents, from loss and grief. It's being used a lot right now in Ukraine and in Turkey as a reaction to war and large-scale disasters. And it's used in a brilliant way of working with oppression and discrimination and systemic trauma. And it's also beautiful for working with developmental attachment and complex traumas. So it's a broad spectrum treatment, and it's one that I feel so much gratitude that I get to teach. And everywhere and that I teach it, I can see the impact, and I know that it's spreading around the world. So I'm happy to come to Finland for the first time. So a little bit about me. I've been a trauma therapist for 30-something years. I'm primarily now a teacher and a sex educator. I don't have a private practice anymore. My main job is to train professionals, and I teach on many continents, in many languages, in many cultures, how to treat post-traumatic stress, complex developmental trauma. And my primary focus in the last 8 years has been on working with sexual assault, sexual abuse, treating infertility, working with dissociation. And what's so, big right now is body and gender shame, couples with incompatible libidos. One of my specialties is male survivors, and gender-based violence in situations of war and occupations. And recently, I've been asked to develop programs for clinicians working with Ukrainian refugees and survivors of war rape, which is a very intense topic. But regardless of whatever trauma I'm working with, we're working with, so much of my interest and desire is to help all people find pleasure and ease in their bodies, to celebrate their sexuality, their sexual orientation, their sexual desires, and especially those that are reluctant to be embodied, which are most people on the planet, and teaching these trauma-informed practices to sex therapists and intimacy coaches. So there's this beautiful crossover that I really enjoy. I am completely informed by SE. That's my primary orientation. Everything I do in an SE way. I can't help myself. And it was developed 40 years ago by Dr. Peter Levine. But I've had a lot of additional training and certification in sexuality and developmental psychology. And like I said, my own references to gender-based violence. I was trained as in traditional clinical psychology. I pretty much hated every moment of it. I don't say that out loud too much. And I just, when at the end of all that years of education, I just felt like I didn't know anything. And I really didn't have what I wanted, which is to really get into the core of people. So after university, I went searching for additional training. And it was in 1999 that I discovered SE, and that was the moment that changed my life. It crossed over in all of my interests, which is in the medical, in the scientific, in the embodiment, in the trauma, and it was really the missing piece that was not in my clinical training. And what it helped me do, and what I realize it does, is that it really helps people understand the many complex levels that occur in people when they react to stress and trauma. And in addition to the emotional and cognitive training I got, SE recognizes, and this is what makes it unique, the physiological responses that are always functioning when we are faced with any kind of trauma or anything that feels overwhelming. And that includes both negative and positive experiences. So it's not just trauma, but it's also, in my world of sexuality, the challenge is often receiving or experiencing pleasure, which can be unbearable and is overlaid by shame, as the sex therapists know, for large numbers of people. So that's where I'm really heading, is how do we remove the shame and the trauma so that people can really get to where we are designed, which is in our physiology, which is in our felt sense, it's in our bodies. So when I'm speaking of physiology, really what I'm referring to is the autonomic nervous system with all its automatic, and involuntary responses. So we all know about the fight, flight, and freeze response that has been thrown at us, continuously. But SE recognizes the nuances to this basic science, and that's what SE adds. And Peter Levine's magic was not only in introducing what is really going on when someone has a traumatic symptom, but also how to actually get into the physiology and to directly work with the physiology and alter the reactions. And I'll give more examples later on. But what does it mean to include the body or the physiological responses? So I want us to do a little exercise together so you can get this at the body level. So I suggest you close your eyes, but you don't have to if that doesn't feel comfortable for you. But I want to invite you to think of someone that is living who you love, who you deeply care for. It could be a person, a child, it could be a pet. So see if you can get a picture of them in your mind, if that's possible. And it sometimes helps to put them at a bit of a distance so you can take your time and actually have a look. Really look at them, perhaps just their face. It doesn't really matter. But what's important here is as you see them or think about them, I want you to see if you can sense where you feel love for them. Where does love live in your body? And when you feel love, how does it show up? How do you know? What are the qualities? Perhaps there's a part of your body that lights up or gets warm, feels more expansive or alive. And if it's really big, you might actually feel yourself tightening as you think of this person or pet. If you want, you can experiment with moving back and forth between seeing or sensing the beloved and then coming back and noticing what's happening in your body. It could be in your chest, your heart, your belly, your eyes, your mouth, your skin. And then slowly broaden your awareness, meaning expand into your arms, your hands, and even into your legs or your pelvis, where you might experience some tension or tingling, again, or some warmth. And then if you can return to those places in the body where you experience love, ask yourself, is there an impulse? Is there a movement that I want to make? If the impulse isn't clear, let's check into your arms, your shoulders, your legs, and ask them, what do they want to do if anything was possible? They may want to reach out or reach up. You may want to move towards this person or pet. And often with the sensation or feeling of love, there's a desire to touch, embrace, or to hold, to bring them closer to you. You might even feel the urge to kiss them. Could be a person, a child, or a pet. I like to smooch my dog as often as possible. So what we're noticing here is the impulse and the desire, but also the movement, what the body wants to do when it feels that impulse or that sensation of love. And see if you can envision what would perfectly satisfy that impulse. And notice as you complete that, see if there's some kind of a shift in you. And then very gently come back. You can open your eyes, maybe just give your body a little squeeze, a little tapping, move it around a little bit if that feels right to you. So at its most simple, this is a lot of what we're doing in SE. You're bringing people into connection of something. It could be love, it could be fear, it could be grief, it could be rage. Noticing where, it could be sexual pleasure, yeah? We're noticing where the body is touched by that. And then we're broadening our awareness to arms and legs, if that's necessary, to see if there is a movement that wants to happen. And what we did just now is we experienced the very, very deep and very hardwired impulse of moving towards love, moving towards contact, touch, connection. It's a very essential impulse. It's, for most of us, it's the first one we had, to move towards the breast. And of course, we know about other impulses. We know about the fight and flight and protection responses, which is where we are naturally designed to move away from threat and danger. So SE adds this awareness of the importance of the bodily responses, gets us in touch with them, if you want to look at it that way. And it is through these that we best resolve the grip of trauma. We just need to help the client access what they were designed to do. And when we're working with sexuality, it's the same impulse, right? Under all the trauma, there is this impulse to move towards another for touch, connection, affection. But sometimes it's buried by trauma. But if we know how to get back to that impulse, we can more easily help people move towards what they really want. And sexuality is part of that before it is shamed or traumatized out of us. So the blueprint and the template is there. There's this deep wisdom in each person. And this is what Peter spent, decades trying to find. And what we're looking for is how to access this impulse, but also how to recognize what interrupts it, what gets in the way of it. Sometimes it's a thought. Sometimes it's a memory. Sometimes it's freeze. Sometimes it's uncertainty. And yet, if we continue to move underneath to get to the impulse, we can help people resolve their traumas. And it's not that we're ignoring all that other, that also is a part of it. But we want to return to how the body is designed. So this knowledge is extremely important when reworking childhood trauma. Even though we all have these deep and natural impulses of moving towards, a child who is sexually abused by a larger, stronger, faster person who is most often in a higher status position, the child doesn't dare listen to their body's impulses to run or fight. In fact, if they did, they almost unconsciously know that it won't end well, that they will likely be harmed more. And the impulse to move towards is often stopped by threats if they do tell. So if you ask any survivor what they think would have happened had they fought or run or told someone, you get the opposite. No way. No way. And yet the criminal justice system often universally shames children and adults, some cultures and systems worse than others, for not fighting and for not running and for not telling someone. And very often the victims, if they do tell someone, are not believed. They're discounted. We all know this. So rarely what is expected as the wise option. But sadly, the survivor is often filled with debilitating shame because they didn't utilize these social ideas of appropriate reactions. So again, SE takes people back to what they really did do, and we support that because it worked, but also underlying that what the body didn't get to do. And this is a piece of SE that just gets me so excited. So for example, a child who didn't use the strategy of fight or flight, they use other strategies that we have to acknowledge, like freeze or dissociation. And we look at dissociation as a flight response. I'm out of here. And sometimes they do try to move towards and appease the offender. This is especially if they're close to them. Or they go along with the abuse to get it over more quickly or to give the offender what they want. And often they hope if they just keep doing the right thing, it will eventually lead to some kind of loving behavior. That's often the motivation. But of course, that rarely happens. Yeah, and that's that deep grief of betrayal. And it's also this deep grief that there's something wrong with me that I never figured out how to get the love from this important person. And that's often at the core of deep lack of self-esteem. So what happens is that survivors tend to act in. They act in by self-hatred, shame, self-harm. They try to regulate through substance abuse. They do everything they can to avoid feeling, especially their bodies. They self-medicate, when in reality, what they are avoiding, ignoring, and medicating, which is, interestingly enough, the way into the resolution. It's into these deeper impulses. But this has to be done in such a way that the client doesn't get overwhelmed. And this is where SE is brilliant. And because SE works in this really slow and gentle ways that takes the fear out of the memory of the trauma, takes the fear out of the body also. So buried under whatever survival strategies that they used are still those fight and flight and move towards impulses. And the SE therapist is always going after those because it is the completion, and this is really important. It is the completion. It is allowing the body to do now what it wasn't able to do back then, which is what calms the body down. It quiets the trauma reactions. And what's so amazing from doing this work, it's like the body is just waiting. It's like the body is like a small child. It's just waiting for someone to notice it, to read what it needs, to listen to it, to ask what's going on inside, and to help it do what it desperately wants to do, which is often these action patterns. And they don't have to be done by running or fighting or fleeing. They can be done in the same way that I just did it with you with love. They can be done through envisioning, but they're always connected into the felt sense, into the sensory motor pattern. And when the body gets to do what it desperately wants to do, it gets it right. There's a sense of completion. And the brain, interestingly enough, doesn't know the difference between whether it did it then. All it knows is that it gets to do it now. And so even though it wasn't possible to do some of these actions during the moment of the abuse, the body being able to complete these patterns, do what it's designed to do in our offices, it will actually settle the brain. It settles the nervous system. It literally quiets the amygdala. It settles the emotions of fear and danger associated with the event or events. And again, this is just a very short and quick explanation of one of the primary ways that SE resolves the symptoms of trauma. So a nuance of this is that there's also the modern fight response, that when the fight response doesn't have a chance to express itself as a child, then the fight response in modern day gets squelched, gets overridden. The fight response in modern life is not really about fists, or if you come from the US, guns. It's more about being able to tell the truth, right? It's being able to tell the truth to a loved one, to a friend. Modern fight responses are about setting boundaries. No, I don't want to do that today. I'd rather do this. Modern fight responses are like asking for raises and moving towards goals. It's about stating preferences. And we want to help our clients access these impulses that have been buried, because they have these strategies that now cover up their ability to move out into the world and be successful. So I want to give us a little bit of an experiential, and then we will move to questions. But I want you to see if you can think of a moment, ideally recently, where you felt misunderstood. You may have been dismissed by someone. They may have accused you of something that you didn't do. They misunderstood you. Maybe somebody wrote something on social media about you that was mean or harsh. Maybe your partner said something hurtful. So it doesn't have to be perfect. What we want to do is same thing. We want to, that when we feel hurt or misunderstood, that we feel that somewhere. See if you can identify where in your body you feel this. It's likely to be a different place than you experienced love. The common areas for this is tightness. And you might feel your heart rate increase a little bit. Yeah, your breath change. These are the autonomic reactions. You could feel some constriction in your chest or your jaw, or a bit of icky feeling in your stomach. And again, broaden your awareness, right? Because there's a lot that happens in the arms, the hands, the legs. And in the office, we can have fun with this because it's not about what you can do. You probably wouldn't do this to the person, but it's really what your body wants to do. That if anything was possible in your wildest imagination, you truly listen to your body, how would it express this injustice? And again, common reactions are strangling. People like to strangle. That's a good one. Shaking, pushing, letting them know how you feel, yell at them. So again, feel all those places. Feel your hands, feel your wrists, your fingers, your jaw, your throat. And see if you can give yourself just this little gift. Nobody knows what you're doing, about what you want them to know and how your body wants to express that. And indulge yourself, if you can, in the fantasy. And notice if it's hard, if there's any small part that feels good. See if there's any pleasure in doing something you wouldn't necessarily do in person. Now, you can come out of that. And again, shake your body off a little bit. And it's very common for this particular kind of exercise to be challenging for people. Some people feel really tired, some dissociate. Most of us are socialized with good reason, not to listen and not to feel these impulses. And gratefully, most people don't carry out these kinds of impulses. And when they do, it obviously can be quite dangerous, but they are still in us. And it can sometimes be really amazing if we let our bodies in our imagination connect to these bodily reactions and allow, again, in our sensory motor patterns to do what we want to do and to feel the pleasure. What we're doing here is we are protecting and defending ourselves. And these are things I do in my imagination when somebody hurts me, or if I notice that someone writes something on social media that really, really gets me affected. I pause, I go inside, I do what I just did with you. I notice all the places that it's affecting me. And I try to settle it down. And if I'm not able to settle it down, sometimes that's enough. Then I imagine what I want to do and say to that person, or how I want to respond to them. And it can be incredibly relieving. And then it protects me from doing something stupid, like, like writing something really fast back. So this is the way that you can use some of these exercises for your own self. It's a great thing to teach parents when they get really frustrated with their child, how to come in and notice all the places in their bodies that are being affected by what some stupid thing their child or their partner did, and encourage them to notice all these places in the body, perhaps to regulate them, which we didn't talk that much about. But also the experience in the imagination of this, the completion of this response. And you can really move it through the body very quickly and prevent people from acting out violently or irrationally. So it's a very, very good tool. So obviously the SE training goes into a lot more of this. And the first year is a lot about understanding the nervous system, understanding these responses, helping people get into these responses that have been interrupted by their necessary survival strategies. It's a lot of focus on recognizing when people get out of their range of resilience and how they can regulate themselves back into a more manageable zone. And like I said earlier, what's important about this is that it helps people return to clear thinking, where they can make appropriate reactions, again, whether that's verbal or physical or even emotional. And so the SE training will give lots and lots of techniques about how to do that, along with how to recognize traumatic patterns and how to work with a lot of the big traumas. That's the second year, how to work with a lot of the big traumas that we all have to deal with, like car accidents, medical procedures, sexual assault, war, intergenerational trauma, ... So those of you that are interested in more experience with working with the physiology of the trauma response, I think it's the best program out there. The May program is going to be very little SE, although I can't not do things in an SE way. So, but there's not going to be any SE theory. It's mostly going to be about how do you find people's impulses to want to find their bodies, right? To want to feel their bodies, to want to inhabit their bodies. How do you find those impulses? And then I've designed dozens and dozens of techniques and exercises to help people drop into their bodies in really safe, what we call titrated ways. So it's very good for sex therapists. It's very good for anybody who is working with people in any way that have a reluctance or a fear or a very strong boundary about feeling their bodies, again, which is most people. But there's a lot of sex education in it also. There's a lot about understanding the sexual response and how to improve that and how to move shame out of the way. We do a whole exercise on shame. We'll do a whole day on working with male survivors and the difference between male survivors and or male identified survivors and female identified. Yeah, how to work with couples, how to work with low libido, how to work with the aging body. So those are things that we don't touch on in the SE training at all. And of course, the basics of and the specifics of working with sexual trauma and how to do that in a way that doesn't re-traumatize, which is SE. So you'll get some SE. So that's all I had for you tonight. And I understand there's probably some questions and I'd love to hear them about anything. I'm all yours for the next half hour. Before we open it up, since we've been staring at the screen and we are embodied people, let's just take a moment and take a bit of a stretch. If you need a minute just to go get some water or pee or something to eat, take care of your bodies, but mostly just rest your head and necks. Notice if you're holding any tension in your shoulders and your spine. And just anything else that you might be experiencing inside or out. So what would you like to know?
So if you have questions, you can either put your hand up or write in the chat. Jos on kysymyksiä, niin voitte nostaa käden ylös tai kirjoittaa chattiin suomeksi tai englanniksi. Kummin vaan, tai kommentteja.
And you're welcome to speak in Finnish if you want, whatever's most comfortable. Or did you just say that, Leah?
I said that.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
I also invited comments if people have, like, did this resonate with them, or how did it sound?
Nice, thank you. Yeah. So you need to unmute yourself.
So Maya G.
Maya.
Hi. Can you hear me? Yeah. I think you maybe just answered my question slightly, but I just wanted to ask about the training that you will be doing in May. Will we be touching on the same subjects in the training that starts next year?
No, completely different. No. No, I mean, I use SE terminology, but what's the reason I developed these sexual trauma and sexuality classes is that it's hardly even mentioned in the SE training. So I felt I needed to develop something separate, something for people who had a genuine interest in the topic. Because in the trainings, there are so many people that have their own sexual trauma that it's just too much to actually talk about sexual trauma in the trainings. It's even challenging to encourage people to feel their pelvises in the training. So that's why I had to do something separate. So, you know, depending on your interest, you'll get a lot out of both. But in both situations, I am very open to questions. So a lot of things that I don't cover in either program can get covered in the questions and answers. And then the training, the SE training has the opportunity of inviting people to do supervision and consultations. So if you have specific questions, either in a group setting or one-on-one with myself or one of the approved providers, you can ask anything you want, having to do with anything you want. So there you go.
So just quickly, if I already have clients that do have childhood sexual trauma or teenage, do you think that this May training would be something that I would need to go through before, or as an addition to the SE training?
Well, I mean, don't we all have sexual abuse clients, right? If you want to learn how to work with the really challenging ones, then they will definitely address that. The training will talk about general trauma, which is super important, which includes sexual trauma, right? I mean, remember, we're working with the body. So in many ways, it doesn't matter if I'm bringing up a memory of my, high school teacher or being raped at age 10, we're still working with the body. And SE is so fantastic for that, that it kind of generalizes traumas to really what is specifically going on in the body right now. And so it's extremely useful information for anything. Whereas the May thing will be touching on things like regulation and how people get activated, but it's much more focused on the full body, being really connected to the full body, and very, very specific techniques for, like I said, working with body reluctance, but also working with sexuality and sexual trauma. It's just, it's 3 days of real focused information.
2 days.
2 days, sorry. 2 days.
So Ariel runs different kinds of workshops in different
I ran
places, and
2
we've
days.
asked 2 days for now, for
days.
starters, and maybe later we'll do something longer.
Thank you for reminding me. I can't keep track of everything.
Elina was next with her hand up.
Hello. I would like to ask, do you have the same topics in May? Because I know that you may come to Norway, to Oslo in September. Do you have same topics?
Yes, the Norway program will be very similar, but it's 3 days instead of 2 days. So there'll be more for the 3 days, but there will be obviously some crossover. Yeah, but it's the same, mostly the same material. Yeah. And someone asked, is it possible to come just for Friday? I don't know. I don't know. That's up to the organizers to decide. So.
Well, think about it. There's also a question from Lisa. How typical is it that people don't feel anything while doing SE exercises or SE work?
How typical is it? Well, I think initially a lot of people don't know what you're asking when you ask people to feel their bodies. So there are a lot of ways of helping people access this. And we're really, as Peter says, we're talking to the brainstem, and it just needs to be wakened up, right? It's like we all have a body and we all have sensations. We just sometimes don't know how to access them. And so this is where, in a way, you're designing a customized body awareness practice for each person, right? Sometimes you'll have people that they can't feel their bodies, but they can feel an impulse, right? So someone says, oh, I'm so afraid. And I might ask someone, well, where do you feel that? I don't know. I don't know where I feel it. And so I might say, well, is there anything your body wants to do? So sometimes, again, they may not be able to feel that they have anxiety in their chest, but they are aware of wanting to move or wanting to run in some way. So there's still a lot of different ways of doing the work without feeling the body. And so that's where some of the fun comes in. You have to actually be very creative to be an SE therapist. And part of that is because each person requires something unique. right? You're going to ask one person what they're experiencing, and they'll give you one answer, and they'll have one impulse, one action. And then the next client that comes in, they'll feel the same experience somewhere very different, and they'll have a completely different action that comes up. So SE is really designed to work with the pace and what the person is most comfortable with. There's no like protocol, which makes it really hard to teach. But there is a kind of order in the SE model. Like the first year is designed just to help with some of these. And then the second year starts to get into more complex situations and specific traumas. So it kind of builds on itself. But there are definitely people who have an impossible time feeling their body. And it doesn't mean you can't work with them. It just means that you're not going to get to them through sensation. You have to get to them some other way. So again, like I say, that's where the creativity comes in.
Somebody was interested in the possible Oslo event. So in the chat, I shared Ariana's, that's my daughter. That's not the Ariel's web page with the program of her workshops elsewhere. So if you want to combine holidays and a workshop somewhere else, that's also an option.
Or if for whatever reason the May date just doesn't work, it's got, I think, 12 of these programs scheduled this year. So there's lots of options. I know that someone wrote in asking, I don't know if you're here, but someone did write in and say, what happens when someone is sexually assaulted and they're drugged? And is the person that asked that here? You know, do you want me to answer that question? Anybody interested in that answer? Yeah. Okay. Maya is. So, you know, again, it's a big answer, and it really depends on the person, but and how to keep this simple. But when we start to work with the event, let's say, you know, here's the event, here's the rape where they were unconscious. What we do is we fill in the sides, right? So we will start to explore what was going on prior to the experience of being drugged. And sometimes there are actually, and this is not to make the person wrong or to fill them with shame. There are usually some very good, clear symptoms or signals that come up that the person didn't pay attention to. Not always, but sometimes there are. And so we kind of like help the person get connected to the body prior to the assault. And then we do know that it ended. And we might also work with that, like when you woke up and you knew it was over. And that's a really, really important moment because so many of the details are missing. The person is like searching for more details. But the really important detail is that it ended. And we have to help people register that in their body. And again, whether that's an accident or whether that's, you know, a moment of a parent having a rage, or even long-term sexual trauma where it went on for many, many years, there are always clear beginnings and clear endings. Doesn't mean it ended forever. It just means that that particular moment ended. And it's extremely important that the body feels that it's over. I survived. I'm here. I made it. Whatever the person wants to say about that. And then we want to start to look for resources. And this is something very, very big in the SE model. When we are in times of of fear and vulnerability. We deeply need the kindness and the support of others. Now, a lot of that is socialized out of us. We're supposed to handle these situations ourselves. We're supposed to get through them ourselves. But in reality, as mammals, especially when we're vulnerable, what can be deeply healing is the felt sense of a kind, loving, caring.
Oops, it seems we have a frozen Ariel. I hope she returns soon.
Other. We often look, oh, I can hear you. I could hear you perfectly. Am I back?
Okay, you were frozen for a little moment there. So maybe you recap your last 2 sentences or something.
Okay. What was I saying 2 minutes ago? Oh, I was talking about resources and vulnerability and kindness. Did you hear that part about kindness?
Yes, yes.
You didn't lose much.
Okay.
All right. So after an event, we want to go searching for kindness, right? That might be the friend that found the person. That might be, again, right after it happened or 4 days after it happened. We want to bring in that experience of someone seeing that it happened, someone caring, maybe somebody hugging, that kind of that first sense of feeling safe again, because that's incredibly important. And then what we can do is we can go through the event. And this is also true when someone is under anesthesia, like if they have a medical procedure, whether it's dental or anything. It's the same thing. It's like that moment of their life is cut out. And it's very disorienting for many people when they lose a part of their life. So what we can do is we can say, let's just pretend that the drug is out of your system. Yeah. And if anything was possible, and you were in complete safety, what does your body want to do? So we can still, as we say, complete the incomplete response if we move the drug out of the way and tune into the wisdom of what the body wants to do. And sometimes that's beating the person up or yelling at them, especially if it's the betrayal of someone they know, how dare you? They want to cuss at them. They want to tell them, get the fuck away from me or whatever. And allowing the body to do what it wasn't able to do, even if it was just in the imagination, can really help clear some of that unknown and uncertainty. And then, of course, we have to deal with the feelings of grief and rage and betrayal when it is a friend, a trusted friend, like a date rape. It's actually so much easier to get raped by a stranger than it is by someone that's known, because of all the emotional complexities. So that's sort of the short answer to how one would work that. So someone wants to know, are there risks working with SE? Not if you are attuned to the person. Yeah. SE works really, really slowly. And I think the biggest risk is people frustrated with how slow it is. They want to get to the big trauma now. They want to talk about it. They want to push through it. And sometimes I let people do that. But then we have to go back and work it in these small, what we call titrated ways. And what that looks like is redoing it and repairing it at certain moments. So for example, the example of the date rape situation. We would go back, we would redo it in that way. And usually it could be bringing in a missing resource. Like as soon as you knew, as soon as that drug was coming on, and if anything was possible, what did you most need right then? Yeah, well, I needed someone to notice. I needed someone to stop the perpetrator and to rescue me. So I'll say, wow, that sounds really smart. I know it didn't happen this way, but really notice your body right now and how it feels when you follow something that your body really wants. So that would be an example of redoing and repairing. The other part of your question is it problematic of working with people who have aggression control issues? It actually works brilliantly for that. Because if someone escalates really quickly, it's not about getting them to feel aggression. It's about actually regulating their aggression. And I used to work with anger. I had, for some reason, in one period of my life, I had 3 really angry men come who wanted to work on anger management. I don't know why they found me, but they did. And what I did with them, I did the same thing with all 3 of them, is they were already telling me that they were afraid of their rage. They were afraid of what they were going to do. So what I did with them is I worked on helping them regulate little tiny experiences like annoyance. You know, when you feel annoyance, how do you know, right? Same thing I did with you with love. When you feel annoyance, where do you feel it? You know, it's in my chest, it's in my jaw. I want to growl. Great. Okay. So, and in that same experience of, as you feel that, notice your arms and legs. Yeah. And it might be enough that they just want to express something a little bit. It's like, you know, you're so annoying. Leave me alone. Or it might be really regulating the annoyance if it's feeling like it's building out of control. And we have some very clear and directive techniques like feel the ground right now, right? So instead of the aggression coming out and at someone, we actually bring it more into the lower body, which takes a lot of that aggression aggression energy. And actually, it's not intended to ground it, but it actually helps it move farther down into the system instead of out. And you just practice that over and over and over again. And then you work with something that is frustrating, right? So we go from annoying to frustrating as a little bit more energy to it. Same thing. Where do you feel it? What do you notice in your arms and legs? You know, anything was possible. What does your body want to do? But we never do catharsis. Like we're never like, you know, screaming and yelling and running and pounding. We never do that. We always come back to the impulse, right? So if someone is really feeling rage, let's just say it comes up in the office and it surprises me, I'm going to get them standing up. You know, I'm going to say, okay, I want you to notice where that impulse of anger is. Where do you feel it? I'm going to redirect it to the inside before it has a chance to go outside. And it's very directive. It's like, no, come back, feel your feet, you know, feel your bones. Yeah. Feel your hands and just feel your hands. And so Peter Levine, who comes from huge catharsis, he came from bioenergetics and he came from the Gestalt, which is what I did too. And one of my favorite sentences of his is that it's not important that you express emotions. It's important that you experience them. And that is a completely different set of rules. Yeah. We work a lot in imagery, right? Somebody is like really rageful at their parent who abused them. So again, I'll get them up, I'll get them sensing the ground, I'll get them feeling the power in their arms and legs. And in a way, they're what we call containing the rage. And with rage, there's almost always something that you want the person, with whom you're angry to know. Either that or there's a physical, action. And that action, like I said, might be imagining shaking them shaking, right? They might have their hands out like this, but we're like, feel it in your arms, feel it in your hands. Yeah. And as you shake them, what do you want them to know? So it's very directed, it's not just pounding pillows and screaming and yelling, and we don't do any of that. Now and then when someone comes out of freeze, they come out big. And if they've been frozen in their anger for a long time, we let them be big for, 10, 15 seconds. I get them up and standing. I don't, tell them to slow it down or anything, because it's really important. Those that suppress it also have that opportunity to feel the bigness of it. But we do create a container for it through arms and legs and all of that. So what do I think about catharsis? I don't like it. I spent 12 years doing catharsis at the Esalen Institute, where it was all about, being in process. And what's interesting about the whole cathartic therapies of Gestalt and some of those is that they are actually calming down quite a bit. People are realizing that very little is other than the immediate sort of dopamine rush that happens when you scream and yell and beat pillows, and it doesn't make lasting change. So that's why Peter, who came from that model, he also realized for years and years and years of doing that the trauma didn't go away. It was just a momentary release. And for people that are really, really shut down, it's good, to maybe have a big movement or a big sound, never a scream, but a growl or something like that. But other than that, as I said, it's more important in the experiencing of it. And sometimes the imagery of it is way more powerful. Like I might ask someone, okay, if you were 3 years old right now, how would your body express that? What would it do? What would it look like? Yeah, I would pound on the earth and scream and yell. Great, imagine that. Imagine it. And how does it feel? Again, when you imagine screaming, what does it look like? Turn it into an image. Is it like a fire breathing dragon that's, toasting everything? Is it like a sound wave that makes all the rocks and buildings shake and collapse? So we really get into it, but we get into it through imagery. And through standing in it. And that really seems to be a lot deeper. And that, again, like I said, the expression of what do you want that person to know, which is different than how you might want to destroy them. Does that make sense? Johnny? Great. It is interesting. It's a different way of working. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, we have 9 minutes left for last questions or comments. Oh, that was a long one now. Ariel, do you want to read that straight from the chat?
Yeah.
From Ida?
Valvira, I don't know what that is. Thank you for a good presentation that are already Valvira accepted. I don't know what that is.
Valvira is the Finnish state authority that accredits social and healthcare workers. They are like state licensed workers, healthcare and social workers.
You don't have to have a specific education to take the training, although that's completely up to our organizers to decide. What we generally let into the training is anybody who works with trauma, right? So, we'll have people that have no other training other than like an instruction as a yoga teacher, but they're doing it in the prison system, or we have people without specific training, but they're first responders, they're going into crisis areas. Or so I don't know what that is. Like I said, it is intended to be put over what you already do. You don't take the SE training with no professional experience. You need to have a practice of some kind, because there's so much experiential practice that if you don't have people that you can then do what you do SE with, in what you do, it'll just be wasted time. It needs to be applied. It needs to be practiced. It needs to be experimented with. And, like I said, as long as, you are working with people in some capacity where you're going to encounter trauma. We let school teachers in. The training is not as important as the application of the practice. At least that's how I look at it. But again, that's up to our organizers. You'll have to appeal to them.
I can confirm that that's our approach. Because apparently it's Peter Levine who has wanted to keep it quite open. So we follow his line, and but like Ariel said, it's important that already during the training there's a possibility to start practicing the skills, and because you don't learn somatics just by studying from books or studying the theory.
And a lot of times we do have, touch therapists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, massage therapists, who take the SE training, and nurses. We even have a number of medical doctors. And often what happens, this is so interesting, is that a lot of them stop doing what they're doing and take some courses so that they can be like more legally licensed or credentialed to do more like one-on-one. With so many doctors that have stopped because they're frustrated with their medical practice, and they're now doing, we have emergency room doctors that are working with clients doing SE. We have a person who specializes in autoimmune disorders that's just doing SE with her really, really sick clients. We have a woman that is a medical doctor who was a midwife for a long time. She's applying it, to a rape. And anyway, there's a lot of very creative ways of doing SE. And a lot of people, like I say, give up what they were doing and, decide to move into doing more sort of sitting across clinical practice. But that's nice, because then people go into these, certifications really good at what they do already, and are way ahead of most new students. So, anything else?
There's still time perhaps for one question.
And sometimes, we'll get the psychotherapists and psychologists that are kind of like grumbly that they have to work with people that aren't as licensed. But what we find is that the rich crossover and cross learning that happens, usually after a module or two, everybody just loves everybody. And there's just so much richness that happens that one forgets what one's sort of pedigree is, and is really impressed with the skills that are starting to develop. So that separation that often happens is beautiful. TRE. I have a lot of opinions about TRE. There are a lot of people in the SE community that are also trained in TRE. So I have asked numerous times, you know, how do you use it? And, you know, like so many things, EMDR was this way too. You know, there's this sort of belief that it cures all trauma, and TRE for a long time, you know, was promoting its model as it'll heal all trauma. I don't know if they still do that, but they used to do that. And the SE people that are trained in TRE say TRE is really good for immediate crisis, you know, for shaking something off. But it really does very little for like developmental traumas that happened a while ago. And I have done a number of sessions with TRE instructors, and I always judge a model by the teachers. And I just have to say that both of these teachers had the most dysregulated systems I literally have ever worked on. I was doing table work with one of them, and I put my hands on her, and it felt like I was getting shocked. She was not regulated. She, you know, was like this. And so I don't really have a lot of faith that TRE, you know, can really genuinely and deeply clear in the way that SE does directly with the nervous system. So, and both of the teachers that I worked on were equally, one of them went through SE and wanted to be an assistant. And I said, no, I'm sorry, you're not regulated enough. So, and it's very rare that I turn down people to become assistants. So.
We have 1 minute and there's one question, which could be a big one. Tell something about effect of SE after traumatic labor.
40-minute answer. But a lot of people are using SE for that. I can tell you that. Yeah, I can't answer that right now. I mean, the short answer would be is that you go through the whole stages very, 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 very slowly. Ask what was missing, what was needed, what wanted to happen that didn't get to happen. Support the person in doing that. What resources were needed. And work it that way. And it's a common one. We touch a little bit on that in the second module of the intermediate year when we talk about medical trauma. So, but again, if you took the training, you could ask that in a consultation. I could spend an hour on it. Anyway, I think we've done it. Thank you all very much. Thank you, my lovely organizers, for inviting me to do this. Appreciate it. And I hope you all got a little something.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
I think Amita still wanted, if somebody came in late, Amita will say a few words about their May opportunity to meet Ariel alive. And then we will send you all also the information and the link to the recording.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ariel.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you, Ariel.
Thank you, Ariel. It was beautiful. So we're looking forward to meeting you in May. So if you want to go, please feel free. And I will say a few words about the May event.
Sounds good. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Bye. Bye.